Today, we are going to be talking about collecting with empathy. And I've brought a special guest here today, Rifqa Bobo, who is a operations expert. She's been doing collections operations for over a decade. She is going to provide us with some insight into her experience with working in operations and more specifically, collecting with empathy. So welcome, Rifqa.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You know, yeah, great. Thank you for being here. Uh, when we think about collecting with empathy, maybe we should perhaps start with, what does it mean to you? Like when we think about collecting with empathy, how would you define that?
Well, for me, Dan, collecting with empathy is really about collecting in the real world. It's meeting the consumers where they're at. It's taking into account everything that's going on with them in their lives and approaching resolution from that place. So collecting with empathy, I kind of look at collecting with in reality, actually.
Yeah, and the reality's changed now, hasn't it? When we look at what's gone on since the pandemic, even if we go maybe even just a few years prior to the pandemic, this whole notion of collecting with empathy was just a foreign concept to many people who were in the collections industry. But now I think it's an expectation. We're seeing even in the financial services area where companies are changing the lexicon, where they're removing the word collections from it, and they're saying things like customer care or what have you to really talk about collections. So the expectation is that there is more of this collection with empathy vibe that goes on.
Absolutely.
So now that we've sort of defined what that is, from an operational perspective, how do you coach people to this? Like, how do you take a collector who perhaps had maybe more of a bias or experience, maybe collecting without empathy or collecting maybe the old way of doing things? How do you change their mind, or how do you prepare them to be able to collect better in this space using empathy with the customer?
Well, the pandemic was really beneficial in a way that it was a big event that we all participated in. So we can all kind of pull from that and understand that we went through something and it affected everyone differently. So how we have our associates approach it is basically a case-by-case situation, looking into each person's situation, figuring out what happened and what can we do to help. So before in collections, where we had a pretty set, concise procedure for handling things, now we're more looking at it on a case-by-case basis. So we're teaching our associates to be more empathetic as far as how they are listening and how they are digesting the information so that they can basically give the consumer personalized help, because everyone was affected differently and everyone needs a different kind of resolution.
What stood out to me, what you just said, Rifqa, is that personalized solution. So I think you're spot on, absolutely spot on. I think it's this customized version of what we used to do, where before it may have been a one size fits all or more of a t-shirt sizing, where maybe it was high risk, low risk, medium risk kind of a thing. Yeah. But now it's really trying to look at that tailored approach for each customer and finding out what their situation is, and I'm trying to figure out how we can solve it for them in their particular space. Definitely. One of the tools that I'm familiar with in helping collectors with these types of skill sets is sort of using AI through these sort of virtual customer experiences, where you can train a bot, and then the collector can quite literally log in and have a conversation with a virtual customer. And in the background, we can train those bots to react to different situations. We can measure customer sentiment, the collector ability, and we can go back and have the recording and go back through it with them in that space. So that really is one of the tools that when we talk about training, not just doing some of the things that you talked about, but just using technology as well to help drive some of that.
Absolutely.
So how do you? So once we've done that, we've coached them, and we put this into sort of our culture, if you will. What do you do to measure it? If we want to inspect what we expect, if we expect our collectors to be more empathetic and use this customized empathetic approach, how do you go in and try to measure that and score them on these metrics.
I'm glad you asked that, Dan. I mean, it's very important to be able to measure these approaches to see if they are effective or not. And one of the key metrics that we do look at is average call time. In collections, one of the biggest issues that associates run into is they get hung up on. A lot of times the consumer is just disconnecting the line because the calls do feel sometimes very transactional and very cold. But by applying empathy, even in the tonality, we have found that it has lengthened the call for the associate so that they have more time and more opportunity to suggest solutions and explore different options for the consumer. So in an industry where the call time is very short due to the cold and rigidness of the calls typically, when we're now seeing the empathy applied, we are seeing longer calls. So that is a strong metric that we look at when we are trying to coach and gauge the effectiveness of this tool.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's interesting because that's one of the metrics I think that many collections operations look at to see if there are hangups or short calls where somebody just disconnects early. That's a great way to look at it. One other way to sort of measure this, again using technology, is through the use of speech analytics. Most operations and companies have purchased this, but very few of them have been able to really use it in an effective way to help drive performance. And so the technology has evolved from an AI perspective, where again they can measure the customer sentiment, they can listen to tone of voice, they can even measure the collector sentiments. Maybe the collector had a bad call, isn't quite engaged, or what have you. And the speech analytics can pick up on this type of thing. So it can either alert you as an operations manager, and you can see that one of your collectors is struggling on a call, which will allow you to either barge in or to coach them via some sort of same time messaging, or to simply go back and give them feedback post call. So different ways to either through just simply looking at a dashboard and looking at certain metrics as you described, or to be able to use the technology on the more of the qualitative component of it. So yeah, very new ways to sort of bring empathy into the collections workspace.
Absolutely.
So anyway, well, so that's all the questions I've got for you today, Rifqa. Thank you very much. I think we've learned a few things today. One is that we are in a different environment in the post-pandemic space. We are evolving every day that we are doing collections here, and we've got to be sort of at the tip of the spear when it comes to how we manage our operations and the technology we use to get there. We also know that this requires us to sort of be coaching our teams to really be good at active listening, to really help them create that customized point of view that you described earlier. And then the third thing is that we really have to figure out a way to measure this. The traditional metrics that we've had in the past, perhaps of looking at things like conversion rates and dollars collected and other sort of outcome metrics like that, are still important, but we also have to look to create new metrics around it's not just the what we do, but the how we do it type of a thing. So hope you all enjoyed the video today, and stay tuned for our next one.
Take care.
Bye-bye.